All right, hi folks. Sean Kelly here, longtime Plone aficionado, fan, and general booster. Today I'm going to give you a quick little talk about something that I like to call using semantic knowledge inside of Plone. So without further ado, let me just start a presentation here that you guys can take a look at here. Hopefully you're looking at a blank screen, but it's not going to be blank for much longer. So this is Semantic Plone. We're going to be using the resource description format to curate, that is to create, update, manage, and synchronize content within a Plone website using Rdf. Now, welcome to World Plone Day. This may be deja vu for some of you. Yeah, this is deja vu because if you look closely here, this is the Plone 2020 conference. There we go, right there. I gave this as a lightning talk where I had the subtitle 50 slides in 5 minutes. Yeah, I talked pretty fast. What I want to do now is revisit this talk with a bit more detail, maybe a bit slower presentation. Maybe I'll talk like the other cat here, just make things somewhat more chill. There is some new material as well, too. So if you thought I rushed through it the last time around, well, I did for one thing, but I'm going to call this version of the talk 70 slides in about 15 to 20 minutes, probably more around the 20-minute side. So in the interest of time, let's get this show on the road. So once again, the outline is we're going to look at who's doing this, what Rdf is, give some examples, see how it's actually implemented in one particular Plone site, and look at some future work. Now, I'm not going to do this as quickly as it takes to summarize Proust. We're going to take things nice and easy this time. All right, so who is doing this? Well, the Early Detection Research Network, or EDRN, is a project that I'm really privileged to work on. It's a cooperative agreement with some of the work that I do for NASA. It's part of the National Cancer Institute, which is part of the National Institutes of Health in the United States. And their whole charter is to develop ways to discover cancer as soon as possible. Why? Well, because earlier detection means faster intervention, which means better outcomes for patients. When you can detect cancer at stage 1, or if it's in a precancerous lesion, for example, you have a much better chance of having a healthy, productive, active, happy life than if you wait until the cancer progresses, for example, to stage 4, and where it was metastatic and things just really go pear-shaped after that. So how do we do it? We do it with biomarkers, and biomarkers is biological chemical indicators for a disease. One of the best standards for biomarkers are the non-intrusive kind. For example, just spit on this microchip and sensors in it will tell you if you have a possible cancer, maybe see a doctor about it. And we develop biomarkers by managing just enormous amounts of data using bioinformatics. And that's just a fancy portmanteau, biological informatics, or just another way of saying computer stuff for biological research. So what exactly is the problem that we're facing here? Well, we've got a bunch of applications within the Early Detection Research Network. We have the biomarker database, of course, which tracks all of the biomarkers we're studying and what phase they're in and what organs they indicate cancer for. We have a publication registry whose job is to keep track of all of the scientific articles and journal publications that we make with research about the biomarkers. We have a study manager that's used to run clinical trials and to keep track of how a protocol is executed and does it have institutional review board approval. And we have a science data repository, and this is used to collect all of the data, for example, from microscopic slides or from time-of-flight spectrometers and so forth. And it's a lot of data, but we also have a portal that uses our beloved technology, Plone, that's sort of in the middle of all this. It's sort of like the first view that a researcher gets into the system, but it also is the public face of the Early Detection Research Network. All of these applications, including the portal, are written in a lot of different technologies, and they were sort of stovepipe applications written by different groups, so they're not terribly interoperable. So we started using Rdf to share data between them. So what exactly is Rdf? It's the resource description format, which is an effort produced by the Semantic Web Working Group of the World Wide Web Consortium. Go ahead and check them out, w3c.org. You can find it there. Rdf lets you make statements about anything, really. As an example, let's take a look at this statement. The Expanse was written by James S.A. Corey. A pretty simple statement. It has three parts to it. There's a subject, the predicate, and an object. The subject is the book, The Expanse. The predicate is the creator. And the object in this case is James S.A. Corey. It's just like a natural language, just like English. Subject, verb, object, subject, predicate, object. Same deal here. Here's another statement. Diane Kelly, who is my mother, created me, Sean Kelly. Same deal. We've got subject, predicate, object. Two very different statements. But you can also see that there are some similarities, which means that these statements are imprecise. So if I say The Expanse, am I talking about the novel or the TV series? If I say Diane Kelly, am I talking my mom or any of the other thousands, hundreds of thousands of Diane Kellys out there? And what do I mean by creator? I mean, it's one thing to write a book. It's something else to give birth to a human being. But I'm using the same word in both of these cases. So we use uniform resource identifiers to give a more precise meaning to what we want to say. So instead of saying The Expanse was created by James S.A. Corey, we could say the book with this URI, which is an international standard book number 978-0-316-12908-4, has the Dublin core idea of a creator, which is James S.A. Corey. These are triples, a collection of subject URI, predicate URI, and object. And the objects are literal values like James S.A. Corey, or they can be other URIs. For example, I might replace James S.A. Corey with a URL, which is a kind of URI, pointing to a perhaps pseudonym database of authors that tells that, James S.A. Corey is actually two people, and that's just a pen name they use. We can expand on the knowledge by adding additional directed elements in this network of statements that we're making. That a book has a genre, which is science fiction, that it has a Dublin core notion of a creator, which is another resource, which itself may have other predicates that are used to describe it. There is an RDF notion of a type here, and we say that it's of a type book, for example. We make an entire graph of knowledge, and the more that we can add to this graph, the more wise our collection of knowledge becomes. When we serialize RDF, there's a lot of different formats we can put it into, but XML is one, and that statement, or those statements that we were just making, might look something like this in XML format. Here we have a description about a certain subject URI, which is the ISBN again, and then we make several statements about it. The subject ISBN book number 978 blah, blah, blah has Dublin core title of The Expanse, has genre science fiction, has a Dublin core creator that is itself another resource that we may describe with RDF. So if we wanted to take RDF and use it to exchange knowledge here, we might send all of the RDF that we have from these various applications into Plone. So here's where the fun begins. How do we make Plone understand RDF? Well, in this example, we're going to be looking specifically at how the Early Detection Research Network uses Plone. But as future work, I'm getting ahead of myself. Just hang on to your hats here. What we'll do is look at some specific RDF in use by the Early Detection Research Network right now. So this is some RDF that comes out of the Science Data Repository. There's a subject URI, there's a bunch of predicates, there's the RDF type. Let's focus first on the object that's being identified, the subject URI. Here it's a URL to a specific data collection called MAST, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in front of it as well too. But in order to identify objects, we're going to need identifiers in our Plone objects. This will be the subject URI. So we'll start off by making a custom content type using the Dexterity framework. We use a SOAP interface that we're calling iKnowledgeObject, derived from model schema, and we give it three attributes here: title and description, because everything should have a title and description, but more importantly, the identifier. This is the URI that uniquely identifies a single object that we're describing. Of course, we're also going to need to put it into the catalog to make our later operations actually work, and for quick lookups and that sort of thing. So now that we have our subject URI taken care of and a knowledge object class, we can make an entire class hierarchy of schema interfaces specific to our application, such as a data collection, a protocol, a publication, and various flavors of biomarkers. All of these objects will be contained in various knowledge folders, using the UML notation here to show that a knowledge folder contains various knowledge objects. And we have a knowledge folder for biomarkers, and we have a different knowledge folder to contain publications. And we have another knowledge folder which can contain a variety of different other objects that are not shown here. So getting back to the RDF, let's take a look next at the middle part of the triples, the predicates and the RDF type. So we've got a title predicate, which is the Dublin core title. We've got an organ predicate, which just has a literal value, things like prostate. We've got multiple principal investigator predicates, protocol. We've got the type, very important here. Some of these object values are literal, some are references, and we'll handle those differently. So let's get our predicates in action here. We sort of map the RDF type to a subclass in that class hierarchy that we were just looking at. So a data collection maps to the data collection RDF type that we saw. And each predicate in that RDF maps to a attribute within this custom content type. So the collaborative group is predicate is a collaborative group attribute in this. The PI predicate is the principal investigator attribute. And some are simple text line entries, and some are multi-values. They're schema.list, and some are references. So we use Dexterity's relation choice in that case. So we have all this in paper, but we need to go from RDF predicate to an actual schema field. What do we do to actually get that those values filled in? Here's where we take advantage of kind of a little known feature of zope.interface called tagged values. You can call a set tagged value on an interface class to associate an arbitrary name value pair. And we make heavy use of this to annotate our custom schema interfaces with additional data that will make mapping from RDF possible. So one of those is the predicate's name, whose value is a dictionary, which lists each predicate URI and the name of the Zope schema field that it maps to, plus a Boolean that tells if it's a reference field or not. Then we have a type URI, and that's used to map from the RDF type that we have in our RDF XML to a specific kind of Zope schema object. And the reason we do that is that in RDF, you can have any number of different kinds of objects being described. If we, for example, have a knowledge folder that we just want to have scientific data collections in them, we use this type URI to filter out any other statements that are about different kinds of objects, say publications or protocols. Finally, we have a tag value called FTI, factory type information, which will be used later. We'll see that in just a moment. We'll get now to the fun part, which is the Idf Ingest. At least that's what we call it. Rdf Ingest is a periodic activity which says, go out, find all the RDF data sources we have out there, and use it to synchronize all of the custom content objects we have. Essentially, it's a ingest RDF view that we have attached to the root of the site, and you need to have the manage portal permission. And normally this is invoked periodically with a cron job, although in earlier versions of this site, when before the waitress server came along, we would use a Zope clock server event to get it going. In different environments, for example, if you might have this like in Kubernetes, you could use a periodic clock event to get things going. What Ingest RDF, though, this view does essentially is get the portal catalog and say, show me every knowledge folder, adapt it to an ingester, and ask it to ingest itself. So I mentioned knowledge folder only briefly. We'll take a closer look at what a knowledge folder is. Here's the Dexterity factory type information for a knowledge folder. It's just a container for knowledge objects, and any of those subclasses that we saw in that class hierarchy diagram can come into a knowledge folder. And here's what its schema looks like. It's got a title and description, because really everything should have a title and description. And it has an RDF data sources, which is a list of one or more URLs that we can do an HTTP GET to retrieve RDF data out of. So now let's actually go through it. Let's implement this ingest method, this ingest adapter. To do that, we're going to need to take advantage of another little known feature, this time in the Plone Dexterity package, called introspection. What is actually happening here? Okay, well, we saw that we were about to call ingest on each knowledge folder. This adapter looks like this. The ingester for a single knowledge folder says, first get all the RDF data sources and read the RDF from them. So basically do a bunch of HTTP gets, and we get a whole bunch of triples, and we put those into a dictionary. So that's what statements here is. We then ask the portal catalog for all of the knowledge objects that we currently have in this folder. And from this, we can do some set algebra. So for example, suppose in the folder right now, we had objects for items A, B, and C, but the new RDF says that we need to describe objects in this folder for items B, C, and D. Well, if we do the new ones, we can take BCD minus ABC. That leaves D as the result of that set algebra. So that's D is a new object we'll have to create. Note that if we reverse that, we do BCD minus ABC, A is left, and that's an item that is no longer relevant. So that's an object that should be deleted. If we take the intersection of those are items that we will potentially have to update. They may have new triples that have different values for various attributes of those objects. And then we just go through and say, create the new objects, update the existing objects, and for all the data objects, call manage del objects on them. All right, so how do we actually create and update various objects? Let's look at, well, I'm starting to get a little pressed for time here, so I'm just going to look at the create objects method here. This check predicates function basically calls get tagged values a lot to get those tag values that we saw earlier, the predicates, the FTI. It also returns an instance of the interface, the Zope schema interface that tells what should go into that custom content type. We then call the dexterity utility method, create content in container, to actually bring a new object to life in the portal. You might recall that FTI attribute that we had as a tag value. That's what you need to pass into dexterity's create content in container, so it knows what particular type of custom content object to instantiate. And we can set one attribute already. All of the objects that we are creating in this ingest process have to have an identifier. The title and description, though, we leave to this loop down here for predicate and predicate map to actually set. And basically, it is to see if there is a predicate in the RDF that happens to have a setting, and if it does, convert it into from RDF representation to Python representation and call set value at it. So here comes the introspection. To set a value on something, I know this looks a little bit hairy, but it's not that bad, really. We ask the predicate map for the double of the name of the field to set and a Boolean of whether it's a reference. Remember, it looks like this in the set tag value call. So organ maps, our URN, EDUN predicates organ maps to the organ attribute, and it's not a reference. The URN, EDUN predicates PI maps to the principal investigator attribute, and it's not a reference, but protocol maps to the protocol attribute, and it is a reference. I'm going to skip the reference setting part here. But basically, we ask the interface for the field by name. We then bind that field to the instance of the new object we created, and then we'll skip down to non-reference fields. You can scan the reference field code setting on your own time. If it's multi-valued, that is, if iCollection is provided by the particular field, then validate each of the values and set them. And if it's a single-valued scalar field, we just validate the 0th value and then set it. And it really is as easy as that. Like I said, update objects, you can use the source yourself. So here's a question. Why do we want to do updates separately from creations? I mean, we saw this set algebra. We have all this extra rigmarole going on. Couldn't we simplify things? If we took every Rdf ingest as an opportunity to just delete everything, destroy all the folder's contents, and recreate them based on what's in the latest RDF. For example, suppose we had a knowledge folder with items A, B, and C in them, and the new RDF came in saying, well, you should be describing items B, C, and D now. We could just destroy items A, B, and C and create new items B, C, and D. Well, the reason we don't is that creation is kind of more expensive than merely updating in Plone. But even more pivotal than that, more crucial, is we don't want to break relationships. If we had other objects that had relation fields to one of these objects that we destroyed, sure, URN assembly C gets recreated, but the objects that we're referring to it, they don't know how to point to a new instance of that. So it really does make sense to try to do updates rather than just destroying everything from scratch. Does this even actually work? I am happy to say, in fact, maybe a little bit smug to say, yes, it does. This is what the website looks like. And automatically, every 24 hours, over 5,000 objects are kept in sync from its various RDF data sources every single day. Here's where the source code is. It's all open source, Apache license, if you want to take a look at it. And here's some future work for it. Now, what I didn't show in this talk was that the RDF ingester classes can actually be subclassed, and you can do this to give extra bonus behavior. For example, if there's derived meanings, things that aren't captured in the RDF that you want to be able to populate a portal with. This isn't really a shortcoming with this approach. It more indicates that the RDF that we have available to us doesn't fully capture all of the semantic nuance that we want to be able to represent. So sometimes it's easier just to do things in code. And so that's why subclassing is a possibility. We could also make this more generic. For example, we saw that the tagged values for that map a RDF predicate onto a ZOP schema field are doubles. The name of the field plus a Boolean that tells if it's a reference field or not. We don't really need a Boolean. We could ask the field itself if it's a reference field. I think at the time, I didn't know how to do that, and I was pressed for time, so I just threw a Boolean in there. Even more interesting, though, would be to use RDFS, that is RDF schema, to generate custom content types based on whatever RDF we throw at it. So we wouldn't need this class hierarchy, which is application specific to the early detection research network. We could throw in friend of a friend RDF at it, or weather RDF, or any kind of RDF. And we could synthesize an object class based on the RDF type, looking it up into an RDF schema, and make those attributes of each of those objects really just on the fly as we need to go, and even provide an RDF control panel to make all of that possible. But that's another presentation for another time. Anyway, so if you have any questions about this, this is how you can reach me, and I would like to once again thank you for this opportunity. Bye-bye.